So I want to talk about staying up all night on Shavuot. I think I'm going to quote some kind of famous sources, but I want to relate to the way some sources dealt with less commonly. So if we open up the Shulchan Aruch, I'm not going to, I didn't create a page on this. Happy to do so at a later stage, but the very end of my my volume of Shulchan Aruch, right before we deal with Hilchos Yom Tov, the Shulchan Aruch deals with Hilchot Shavuot. We know there aren't very many halachot on Shavuot, but the very beginning, talking about the 50th day of Sfiras Omer, the Magen Avram comments about this minhag to stay up all night. So the Shulchan Aruch says, "B'yom chamishim Sfiras Omer hu chag hashavuot." On the 50th day of the Sfiras Omer, it is Chag Shavuot. And then he goes on. The Shulchan Aruch says there, "Tfilah kamo b'yom shel Pesach, yom Chag Shavuot hazeh zman matan Toratenu." Except he changes the blessing a little bit to fit with the day, which, according to the Shulchan Aruch, is the day of Matan Torah. We know that the Torah itself doesn't specify exactly which day the Torah was given, but nonetheless, the Masorah has it that the Torah was either given on Vav Sivan or Zayin Sivan. Here, the Shulchan Aruch paskins halacha, and that's what we do, as we refer to Chag HaShavuot as Chag Zman Matan Toratenu. I guess we could say Zman stretches, not just for the first day, but the second day. It's nice for me. Vav Sivan is my birthday, so I always like to celebrate Matan Torah on my birthday. That makes me very excited. But the Magen Avram comments on this. The Magen Avram, just to put it in historical context, Abraham of Gombin, Poland, was a great posek, a great Talmid Chacham. I don't know if he, in those days in Poland, like the Ramah's Poland 100 years earlier, the Ramah was writing in the 16th century, the Magen Avram was writing in the 17th century. In those centuries, it was really hard to publish in Poland without a lot of money. The Magen Avram, though, was known, Abraham of Gombin was known far and wide, I guess, as a great Talmid Chacham. And people approached him and asked if he would write a commentary on the Shulchan Aruch section or a Chaim. He did. He wrote this commentary, and some people appreciated it. I don't know if they paid him to do so. I guess they probably did. When Avraham of Gombin passed away, again, this is on 1630s, 1640s, when he passed away, his son wanted to publish the Magen Avram as a commentary on Shulchan Aruch. The son writes how the rich people who paid his father to write this commentary wanted to keep the commentary to themselves and not share it with others. So he had to take them to court, but he didn't have a lot of money, and it was a whole complicated thing. Just to understand the role of Magen Avram. The Magen Avram, one of my, Professor Israel Twersky wrote a classic article on the Shulchan Aruch on Yosef Karo, and we're going to come to Yosef Karo and why it's so relevant in a minute. But he wrote Yosef Karo a article trying to claim that Yosef Karo's function in the world was not as a Kabbalist. I'm going to check. I seem to be beginning a number of comments. I don't know if it's because the sound isn't working. So let me check to make sure the sound is working, and it's just people for other issues with the fundraiser. Yeah, it's other people with the fundraising issues. So the Shulchan Aruch, who quotes Kabbalistic texts quite often, he quotes the Zohar and other texts. There was a famous book written by Professor Wroblewski of Hebrew University arguing that Yosef Karo was a great Kabbalist. Professor Twersky liked to say that in the book that Wroblewski titled Yosef Karo, Lawyer and Mystic, there was a lot more mystic and not so much lawyer. That Yosef Karo really was a great halachist. The same thing we said about the Magen Avram. He also quite frequently quotes Kabbalistic texts, knew the Zohar very well, and he also was a posek of the more, I guess, less Kabbalistic framework. Professor Twersky's idea of a Kabbalist is it's someone whose entire frame of reference came from the Kabbalah, and hence the way they relate to everything is from a common Kabbalistic lens. Whereas he argued that the Shulchan Aruch was not that way. Among the Avram, it's interesting if he was or he was not. In a way, he quotes Kabbalistic texts much more frequently than the Shulchan Aruch does, and Yosef Karo does in the Beit Yosef, for instance. However, when he does quote them, he often tries to combine to kind of to kind of hide the differences or minimize the difference between Kabbalah and classic halakhic texts such as the Talmud and Mishnah, etc. So you don't see that in Yosef Karo as much, I believe, but in the Magen Avraham, you see an effort to suggest that Kabbalah and Halakha don't conflict. You see the same thing in the next generation, the Vilna Gaon, as well. The Magen Avraham in our context here brings up this idea of staying up all night on Shavuot. So he says, "B'leil Shavuot ein mekadshina al kos ad tzedek kochavim." Minhag is not to say the blessing Gafen for Kiddush until nightfall, until Segovim Nachtiv, Tvimot Tiena, that the days of Sfiras Omer have to be whole. Then he goes on to say, Ita bezohar, shechasidim arishonim ayu neurim kol halayla, v'oskim b'Torah, that the Hasidim, the early Hasidim, now don't be confused with what we call Hasidut today. That's a movement which started from the Baal Shem Tov in the beginning of the 18th century, 1700s. But rather, we're talking about here, the Zohar is referring to Hasidim Rishonim. I guess he's referring to Hasidim Rishonim since it's like Pinchas ben Yair in the Gemara. So the early Hasidim, and Mishnah Brachot also discusses these customs of Hasidim Rishonim. So here, the Zohar is suggesting that early in the Mishnaic period, there was a custom of Hasidim Rishonim. They would stay up all night oskim b'Torah. Ukvar nagu rov halom dim masot ken. And the Magen Avraham is giving kind of a historical framework of his day, that in his day in Poland, 17th century, this has already become very customary of people who learn Torah, is to stay up all night on Shavuot. He doesn't say common people, but rather he says Rov Halomdim, people who are engaged in Torah seriously, they stay up on Leil HaShavuot. That's quoting the Zohar. Now the Zohar, however we want to look at the Zohar, it was reflecting customs, might be reflecting customs of the early Middle Ages or whatever, but certainly Magen Avraham is reflecting the customs of the 17th century in Poland that had become very ubiquitous to stay up. There is a famous article that a professor, his name's escaping me right now, from Bar Ilan, I believe, or Tel Aviv, wrote suggesting that the impact of coffee houses and import of coffee from the New World to Europe had an impact on this minhag, maybe creating this minhag. I heard many people who like those types of explanations to argue it. That's an anthropological explanation that's really post facto. Why did this idea of staying up, where did the notion come from? Magen Avraham says it's already in the Zohar, but he doesn't love the Zohar's explanation, and it's an example of where he tries to come up with a less Kabbalistic argument. He says, maybe there is a pshat reason to stay up. Maybe he's suggesting people in the 17th century were not all Kabbalists who were staying up, but many people were staying up. Maybe that isn't the coffee houses or whatever, but maybe they were influenced by another idea. There's another idea of why one would stay up. There's a midrash. The midrash says that Shir Rabbah, that on the night of Matan Torah, when Matan Torah is given in the morning, people went to sleep at night, and they overslept. Pretty big deal to oversleep for, but they overslept for Matan Torah. Can eat the midrash? He quotes the midrash Shir Rabbah. Luchen, says the Magen Avraham, Anos Richim L'Taken Zeh. Forever, the nature of Am Yisrael is to try and fix those things which in the past were unfixed. It's interesting because of anything a historical tikkun, a continual historical tikkun sounds almost Kabbalistic. He says there's therefore a tradition for us on Pshuto position to stay up all night to fix this idea that we overslept. And then he talks about the various halachot about what you should do. The Zohar itself, let's jump to the Zohar and see what he's referring to. It's a little thicker, I feel, than what the Magen Avram is quoting this little snippet for us. But here, here it says the following: Rabbi Shimon, referring to Shimon Bar Yochai, Haviyativ v'lai beraita. He would sit and go into the Torah, learn Torah, be engaged in Torah. The whole section, this is part of the introduction to Parshat Breshit or Sefer Breshit in the Zohar, and discusses Yiras Hashem. Right before there's a discussion of Yiras Hashem, Ahavat Hashem. The Yiras Hashem is a precursor to Ahavat Hashem, etc. And then we get Yiras Hashem by learning Torah. And then it comes to the story of Rosh Yochai. Rosh Shimon Havayati v'lai beraita b'lelia dekala itchabrat v'vala. On the night that the bride would connect to her beloved, to her chatan, to her groom, and that is Am Yisrael as the bride of Kadosh Baruch Hu, as the bride of Hashem, on the night they're getting the Torah. It's Dinan Kol Inun Chavraya Dvnei Hechala Dechala. Because we have a Mishnah, the way the Zohar refers to it, a Tanakh source, all these people of the Chevra, the Chevra Kadisha, in the Zohar, and this is something which is taken up by other groups, and especially Hasidim, which the later Hasidim, which you call Hasidim, to have small groups of people who were pursuing deep religious experience. Sometimes that's easier in a smaller group than in a large community. So they would isolate themselves to some degree. And indeed, Rosh Shimon Bar Yochai had a chavraya of students who followed him. And these students who are called the Bnei Hechala, the children or the students of the Heichal, of the chamber, those who learned with Rosh Bar Yochai, the Chala on the Heichal of the Chala is the chamber of the bride. Itzrichu b'halu leila the Chala izmanit l'mehevi liyoma achra go chuppah vala. They have to, on that night that the bride is invited to come in the morning afterwards into the chuppah of her baal, what do they have to do? They have to be with the bride all night long. So symbolically here, either the bride is the Torah, those commentators in the Zohar who want to introduce the aspects of the Zohar called the Partsufim, and then the Sfirot will say perhaps this is Malchut getting ready to connect to Tiferet or to Keter even. The Mechde Ima, they have to be Sameach with her, they have to be joyous with the bride before she connects with the groom. It could be also understood Shuto Shel the Zohar. Maybe this refers to Am Yisrael getting through the chuppah of Matan Torah close to Hashem. But tikuna diu itkanat, and they have to fix. Tikkun actually in the Zohar doesn't really mean fix in the way that it's used today, like L'taken olam, which became like the banner of liberal Judaism. L'taken kind of means to organize it properly. The way, so in other words, the bride has to get ready. Those people who want to be with the bride, with the Torah, have to stay up all night with her getting prepared, just like a bride would get prepared before she met the groom. The so they have to engage in the Torah, and after Torah, they have to engage in the Nevi'im. After the prophets, they have to engage in the writing section, the Ketuvim of Tanakh, Midrashot, Dekrai, and Barazit, and Chochmah, and they also have to learn the secrets of the Torah, because this is like the beautification, the jewelry, all the things of the bride, basically getting ready for the wedding, which is the morning of Shavuot. Vihi v'ulem taha alat kadamat koreshem, and therefore, basically, Shavuot, which we built up from Yetziat Mitzrayim and Pesach, is this grand wedding of the Torah with God, or aspects of the Sfirot, Malchut with Tiferet, but we're in this pageantry, and part of the pageantry, it could be a Torah Shval Peh with a Torah Shval Tav. Part of this pageantry is getting ready for the grand wedding of the next day of Shavuot. So it's ironic in a certain sense, because many people stay up all night and become very tired out from learning, so that the learning in the morning is not necessarily the best. Staying davening in the morning is not always the best, because people are very tired and they get up and they want to sing, they want to read the book of Ruth, etc. And people are falling asleep. And here the Zohar is saying the opposite. This is like the night before the wedding, where Am Yisrael is going to come close to Kosh Baruch Hu. It's our big chuppah, and anything, the Torah is going to connect us all together, and therefore we should be excited and have this adrenaline rush. And the whole night before is we can't sleep, because you have to be connected and get ready and get dressed, and dressing takes a long, long time. The most famous, I think, discussion of staying up all night on Shavuot is kind of in between these two things. We have the Zohar, which tells about this wedding experience. We have the Magen Avram, who's writing on how it had already become so popular, not just the Chavraya, but rather had become popular with the Jews in Poland to stay up all night, influenced by Kabbalistic sources. But the Magen Avram wants to make it again on that midrash that we overslept, as opposed to here, the adrenaline rush is keeping us up. Most famous passage is a wild passage, and this is Yosef Karo. Many people know this passage. It appears in a book called the Shnei Luchot Habrit. The Shnei Luchot Habrit was written by a rabbi, Isaiah Horowitz. Isaiah Horowitz was a rabbi in Germany or parts of Europe that came to Eretz Yisrael. It's a stunning book. I became, for a while, in love with this sefer after I read the memoirs of Glickl of Hamelin. Glickl was this woman, a German woman, at the end of the 18th century, 17th century, beginning of the 18th century, and she wrote a diary. And in the diary, she discusses how her husband used to walk around with the book, this book, the Shnei Luchot Habrit. I have an English version of this diary of the saintly Rabbi Isaiah Horowitz. In other words, the Shlaha Kadosh. There's a custom to refer to three books as Kadosh: the Zohar Kadosh, the Shlaha Kadosh, the Shnei Luchot Habrit Kadosh, and the Orach Chaim Kadosh. And Kadosh is referring to the fact that they're Kabbalists. So this great posek from Europe was a Kabbalist, and he left in his life kind of a collection of all his Torah in an ethical will. This is what he bequeathed to his children, not money, but ideas. It covers Perushim on Chumash, commentaries on Tanakh. It covers commentaries on Halacha, and it covers also Kabbalistic works. It's a conduit of very important Kabbalistic ideas, and of the generation right, the Arizal. And he tells a story that when he came to Eretz Yisrael from Europe, he discovered a manuscript written by Rabbi Shlomo Alkabetz of Lechadodi fame. Shlomo Alkabetz was a student of Yosef Karo, both in Turkey before he came to Eretz Yisrael, and eventually when Yosef Karo came to Eretz Yisrael. And this is the story of why he went to Eretz Yisrael. So in the story, what happens is that the Chavraya, this group of religious people, acolytes, people who are pursuing religious kind of like a group, the small group, got together to learn all night on Shavuot, following the story of Rosh Bar Yochai. They got together, they were learning. I'll just read you a little teeny bit of it. So he says, this is a manuscript I found. Dulachem ki hisgamnu achasid not Rahmana the Patre, Vani Vadu Avdechem Mechaverim Lamod al Nafshenu Leil Shavuot. So Shlomo Alkabet said, we agreed with the Chassid here is referring to Yosef Karo, to stay up all night and learn on Shavuot. Eluneder Shena Meinenu, and to take an oath not to ban sleep from our eyes. He goes on, they started learning, and Yosef Karo had a mystical experience. Yosef Karo was known, he had a spiritual voice that spoke to him. And the spiritual voice was a spiritual voice of the Mishnah. And it came out and said to him how wondrous they were for learning the Mishnah and caring about the Torah, caring about the Torah specifically on Leil Shavuot. But that there are secrets that one can only acquire in Eretz Yisrael. Therefore, they have to leave the diaspora, move to Eretz Yisrael. They unfortunately only had 8 of the Chavraya were there. Yosef Karo and 7 others. They met on the way to the mikveh in the morning. They met 2 others who didn't show up at night because I guess they wanted to sleep. And they scolded them that the Mishnah had promised them had they had a minyan, they would have been merit even greater insight into Torah. But this voice came out of Yosef Karo. It's one of the few, I don't know few, but it certainly is a diary of an eyewitness account of Yosef Karo speaking in tongues when he stayed up all night on Shavuot for the mystical experience of entering the Torah, like the Zohar says. And then he goes on to say they did the same thing the second night, and then the Mishnah tells him they have to make Aliyah to Eretz Yisrael. So the minhag of staying up all night on Shavuot, whether it was impacted by coffee houses or coffee, it certainly has this Kabbalistic idea. I'm not sure why the Magen Avraham felt the necessity to minimize the spiritual component of it. Staying up all night on Shavuot is getting ready for the wedding ceremony, which is the morning of Shavuot, when we read, the custom is to read the Aseret HaDibrot. That's the minhag that's brought down the Gemara. It's read the Aseret HaDibrot, which is symbolic of the entire Torah. That when we got the entire Torah on Yom Chag, Yom Matan Toratenu, Zman Matan Toratenu, was the wedding, as it were, between Klal Yisrael and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and therefore staying up all night it should enable us to have an experience, perhaps not as wild as Yosef Karo, who ended up speaking in tongues, and the spirits came out of him, but perhaps we can have that adrenaline rush that gets us ready for the Ikar, the central facet, which is to wake up in the morning, kum kari baboker, as the Shulchan Aruch says, the very first siman, to wake up in the morning, to praise God, and to relate to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So staying up all night is supposed to be in a preparation for, and one's supposed to learn all night, not just drink coffee and have cheesecake, but is a preparation for the experience of reading the Torah in the morning and feeling a new connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And we shall be zocha to have this special connection to the Rebbeinu Shalom, the wedding ceremony of Klal Yisrael and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, through the vehicle of the Torah, which will take place this Shavuot.